The phone rang just past midnight, slicing through the silence of Ethan Cole's penthouse like a blade. The city outside glittered under the rain, but inside, everything was cold. His whiskey untouched, his tie loosened, his thoughts far away. He'd been staring at a single photo on his desk all night. Amara Lewis, his former assistant, smiling in a company award picture from last year. The woman he fired just a week ago. When the call came again, he groaned, grabbing the phone. "This is Ethan Cole," he said, his voice low, impatient. A pause. Then a woman's voice, soft but trembling. "Sir, this is Nurse Jenkins from St. Mary's Hospital. You're listed as the emergency contact for a patient, Ms. Amara Lewis." His breath caught. "What? That can't be right. She worked for me, but she was brought in an hour ago. Severe injuries. A hit and run. We found your number on her emergency file. You're the only one listed." Ethan's hand went cold. "Is she alive?" "She's in surgery, sir. But we can't promise anything." For a long second, he couldn't move. The city lights outside blurred. He'd fired her in anger, humiliated her in front of everyone, and now she might die with his name as her only contact. He grabbed his coat, keys, and ran. The elevator ride down felt endless. His reflection stared back at him. Tired eyes, expensive suit, empty soul. He had power, money, control, everything except peace. And now, one woman he couldn't stop thinking about was somewhere fighting for her life, alone. The streets were slick with rain. His car sped through red lights. Each flash of the city brought back flashes of her face. Her quiet kindness. Her voice saying, "You should rest, Mr. Cole. You've been working too long." The way she smiled, even when people whispered behind her back. He'd seen it all, but pretended not to. The way his executives mocked her confidence. The way they'd say things like, "She's a little too bold for her position," or "Maybe she should smile more." He'd ignored it, told himself it wasn't his problem. But now, with every passing mile, guilt crawled deeper into his chest. When he reached St. Mary's, the air inside smelled like antiseptic and rain. A nurse behind the counter looked up. "Mr. Cole," he nodded, breathless. "She's in surgery. They're trying to stabilize her. She was hit near 9th and Monroe." The driver didn't stop. He closed his eyes. He remembered that intersection, just a few blocks from where she used to live. "Can I see her?" "Not yet. The doctors are still working." He dropped into a chair, his hands trembling. He hadn't felt this helpless since his mother died. A doctor approached, Dr. Jade Porter, her face serious. "Mr. Cole, are you family?" He hesitated. "No, I'm her employer." The doctor sighed. "Then you should know she was carrying a flash drive in her hand when she was found. She must have been protecting it. Whatever's on it, she didn't let go." Ethan frowned. "A flash drive?" "Yes. We'll keep it with her things." He sat there, mind racing. A flash drive? What could she have been carrying? And why did she list him as her only contact? She had no one else? Hours passed. The clock hit 3 a.m. Rain tapped the windows. Ethan rubbed his temples, the memory of their last conversation looping in his head. She'd stood in front of his desk, eyes filled with hurt. "Sir, that email wasn't me. Someone's framing me. I saw the evidence, Amara," he'd snapped. "You betrayed me." She'd shaken her head slowly. "You trusted them more than you ever tried to understand me." And she'd left without another word. Now, the hospital doors opened, and the doctor returned, her gloves streaked with blood. Ethan stood. "Is she?" "She's stable," Dr. Porter said softly. "But she lost a lot of blood. She's in a coma for now. You can see her briefly." He followed her down a long corridor. Every step felt heavier. When he entered the room, the world seemed to stop. Amara lay still beneath the harsh white light. Bandages covered her head and arm. Machines beeped softly beside her. Her dark skin looked pale under the fluorescent glow, but her face, peaceful, almost angelic, still held that quiet strength he remembered. Ethan moved closer, his throat tight. He whispered, "I'm sorry." His phone buzzed again. He almost ignored it, but when he looked, it was from his office, Claire Hensley, his senior manager. The woman who had insisted Amara was trouble. The message read, "Don't worry about Amara. Everything's handled. Just focus on work." Ethan stared at the screen, his blood running cold. Handled? He looked back at Amara, unconscious and broken, and something inside him shifted. This wasn't just an accident. And as the monitors beeped softly in the background, Ethan whispered a promise only she could hear. "I'll find out who did this to you, Amara. I swear I will." Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, the rain streaked the window like tears. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Cole felt fear, not for himself, but for the truth waiting to be uncovered. A week before the hospital call, Amara Lewis walked into Cole Enterprises with her usual quiet grace, the kind that made people notice without meaning to. She was sharp, organized, and never late. Her dark curls were tucked into a neat bun. Her black heels clicked softly on the marble floor, and her tablet was already filled with the CEO's schedule before he even arrived. To most people, Amara was the ideal assistant, smart, efficient, unshakably calm. But inside that glass tower, her brilliance was both her armor and her curse. People whispered when she walked by. "She thinks she's better than everyone. Cole only keeps her around because she makes him look good. She's too confident for her pay grade." Amara had learned to smile through it. She'd grown up fighting for every opportunity, and she wasn't about to let a few jealous coworkers break her stride. But she also knew that success, especially for someone who looked like her, came with sharp edges. Her biggest strength, her closeness to Ethan Cole, was exactly what others hated most. Every morning, she stood beside him in meetings, quietly placing files in order, anticipating his needs before he even asked. Ethan wasn't an easy man to work for. He demanded precision, hated excuses, and rarely smiled. Yet somehow, Amara had found a way to bring light into his day, reminding him to eat, to take breaks, to be human. He never said it aloud, but everyone saw the difference. And that was exactly what fueled the fire. At lunch, Claire Hensley, the senior manager with a polished smile and sharper intentions, sat with a small circle of executives in the break room. "She's good," Claire said, stirring her coffee slowly. "Too good. Makes the rest of us look like idiots in front of Cole." A young analyst laughed nervously. "He seems to trust her more than anyone else." Claire's lips curved. "Exactly. And trust is power. But power can be broken if you know where to press." That same afternoon, Claire visited the IT department. Her tone was casual, but her words carried poison. "I need you to look into some files Amara accessed last week. Just making sure everything's clean." 2 days later, a forged email circulated. It was supposedly from Amara, sending confidential client information to a competitor. The IT logs were proof. It was enough to raise eyebrows, enough to reach Ethan Cole's desk. Amara didn't know any of this when she walked into the CEO's office that Friday morning, holding his presentation notes. "Sir, you have a meeting in." "Sit down, Amara," Ethan said, his tone cold, unfamiliar. She froze, confused. "Did I do something wrong?" He turned his laptop toward her. The email glowed on the screen. "You sent this." Her mouth fell open. No, that's not me. I have the evidence right here." IT confirmed it came from your login. Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice stayed steady. "Sir, someone's setting me up. Please, you have to believe me." But Ethan's expression didn't waver. His jaw tightened. "I can't have a security breach in my office." "You're dismissed, Amara." The words hit harder than she expected. For a moment, she just stared at him, the man she'd respected, defended, maybe even cared for more than she should have. "I thought you knew me better than that," she whispered. Her voice cracked, but her dignity didn't. She placed her badge on the desk, turned around, and walked out while everyone in the office pretended not to stare. Behind her, the whispers began again, softer this time, almost satisfied. By the end of the day, her desk was cleared, her name removed from the company's system, and her access revoked. The same people who'd envied her now celebrated quietly in group chats. But Claire wasn't done yet. That evening, she sent a private message to Ethan. "Don't worry about Amara. I'll make sure the data leak never reaches the board." Ethan thanked her briefly, unaware of the smirk on her face as she deleted the original forged files. Meanwhile, Amara sat alone in her small apartment, scrolling through job listings, her eyes blurry from crying. On her desk sat a small flash drive, the same one she used to store company project drafts. It was her only proof that the files had been tampered with. She thought about going back, confronting them, but exhaustion won. Instead, she slipped the flash drive into her purse, whispering to herself, "I'll fix this. I'll clear my name." Outside, thunder rumbled. She didn't know that someone was watching her from across the street. A dark car parked under the rain, headlights off. The next morning, she'd never make it to the office again. If this story touched your heart, don't just scroll away. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from. And if you want to see what happens next in Amara's journey, hit that subscribe button right now, because the next chapter will leave you speechless. The air in Cole Enterprises was thick with tension that morning. No one worked, they watched. The message had spread like wildfire through the glass halls. The CEO's assistant got caught leaking confidential files. By 9 a.m., half the building was standing near the conference room, pretending to check emails, but waiting for the show. Ethan Cole stood near the long mahogany table, his jaw tight, his blue eyes cold. His voice, usually calm and measured, carried anger today. "Bring her in," he ordered. When Amara walked through the door, her heels clicking softly against the floor, the whispers died. Her face was pale, but steady. She clutched a small folder to her chest, her fingers trembling. Every eye in the room turned toward her, some curious, some cruel, most judgmental. "Amara Lewis," Ethan said, his voice echoing. "You've been accused of sending private company data to a competitor. Do you have anything to say before I terminate your contract?" Her heart pounded. She'd never seen him like this. "Sir, I didn't do it," she said softly but firmly. "Someone framed me. Please, just let me explain." He slammed his hand against the table. "Explain what?" "We traced the leak directly to your login credentials." Her throat tightened. "I never shared anything. You know me. I've worked beside you for 2 years. Have I ever given you a reason to doubt me?" Ethan hesitated for half a second, just long enough for everyone to notice. Then Claire stepped forward, holding a printed email. "The evidence is right here," she said sweetly. "It's not personal, Ethan. We just have to protect the company." Amara turned to her. "You did this," she whispered. Claire blinked innocently. "Excuse me. You wanted me gone since the day I started," Amara said, her voice cracking with emotion. "You couldn't stand that I earned his trust without pretending to be something I'm not." The room buzzed. Someone coughed. A few people smirked. "Enough," Ethan snapped. "This is a workplace, not a courtroom." Amara swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. "You're making a mistake, sir. Please, just look at me and tell me you really believe I'd betray you." Ethan stared at her, and for a flicker of a moment, doubt crept into his chest. He remembered her staying late to finish his presentations, catching his missed meals, defending him when others criticized his leadership. He remembered her laugh, her honesty, her quiet loyalty. But the whispers in the room were louder than his heart. He turned away. "Amara Lewis, you're fired. Effective immediately." A small gasp rippled through the staff. Claire's lips curled into a faint, satisfied smile. Amara's world blurred. It wasn't just the job she lost. It was the respect, the trust, the bond she'd built. Slowly, she picked up her folder, her badge, her pen. Her hand shook, but her voice didn't when she said, "One day, truth will knock on your door, Mr. Cole. And when it does, I hope you have the courage to open it." Then she turned and walked toward the elevator. The silence that followed was thick and heavy, broken only by the quiet echo of her heels on the marble. As the elevator doors closed behind her, some of the staff began to whisper again. She really thought she could talk her way out of it. She should have known her place. Cole's better off without her. Ethan heard every word, and each one stung more than he cared to admit. He stood there, frozen, staring at the empty spot where she'd been. His throat felt tight, but his pride kept him silent. Claire walked up beside him, pretending concern. "You did the right thing," she murmured. "She was trouble, Ethan. Now the company can breathe again." He nodded absently, but her words didn't reach him. Instead, he saw flashes in his mind. Amara's tired smile after long nights, her soft good mornings, the way she made chaos look graceful. He'd never seen her beg before, never seen her eyes break like that. That evening, as the office emptied, Ethan sat alone at his desk, staring at the email file. Something felt off, something he couldn't name. Her words echoed in his mind. Someone framed me. Please, you have to believe me. He minimized the email and leaned back, exhausted. He told himself it was over, that he'd done what was necessary. But when he reached for his phone, his hand froze over her contact name. He deleted it, or at least he thought he did. That night, long after everyone had gone home, the security team found Amara's access badge left on her desk. The lights were dim. Rain streaked down the windows. From a hallway, a janitor paused and whispered under his breath, "They didn't have to do her like that." Inside the CEO's office, Ethan stared out at the storm, unaware that the truth Amara promised was already on its way, and it would destroy everything he thought he knew. Chapter 5: Guilt in the Hospital Room. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and quiet heartbreak. Ethan Cole walked through the white halls, his shoes echoing against the tile floor. He didn't know what he was doing there, only that something inside him told him he had to be. At the nurse's station, a woman with tired eyes looked up. "Can I help you, sir?" "I got a call," Ethan said, his voice lower than usual. "You said someone named Amara Lewis was brought in?" The nurse glanced at the chart. "Room 204. She's still unconscious." Then she hesitated, studying his face. "Are you family?" He shook his head slowly. "No, I'm her former employer." The nurse's tone softened. "You're listed as her only emergency contact." The words hit harder than he expected. Only contact. It felt like a mirror held up to his failure. A reminder that she had no one else to call, no one else to depend on, not even the man who had once trusted her completely. Ethan's chest tightened. "Thank you," he muttered, and walked down the hallway. When he reached her room, he froze at the door. Amara lay still beneath the thin hospital blanket, her skin pale against the white sheets. A bandage wrapped around her head, and her right arm was in a cast. Machines beeped softly beside her, their rhythm steady but fragile. For the first time since the day he fired her, Ethan saw her not as an employee, but as a person, one who'd been fighting battles he never noticed. He stepped closer and whispered, "Amara." She didn't move. Guilt coiled in his stomach like a living thing. He remembered the way her eyes had filled with tears as she begged him to believe her. The way she'd said, "One day, truth will knock on your door." And now here it was, knocking in the quiet pulse of the heart monitor beside her bed. He sank into the chair next to her, rubbing his hands over his face. "I should have listened," he whispered. "God, I should have listened." A nurse entered quietly to adjust the four. "She's lucky to be alive," she said. "The driver didn't stop. We don't know how long she was out there before someone found her." Ethan looked up. "Is she going to make it?" "She's stable for now, but she hasn't woken up. The doctors say it'll take time." When the nurse left, Ethan noticed Amara's bag resting on the counter beside the bed, its strap torn, a faint smear of dried blood along the side. Something inside glinted under the fluorescent light. He reached for it carefully and found a small, mud-stained flash drive tucked in a plastic hospital pouch labeled Patient Property, Amara Lewis. Curiosity turned to dread. He hesitated, then pulled his laptop from his briefcase, the same one he carried everywhere, even tonight. He inserted the drive. For a moment, the screen flickered. Then folders appeared, timestamps, email chains, security logs. His pulse quickened as he clicked through them. The truth unfolded right in front of him. Every piece of evidence showed how someone had tampered with Amara's login. Fake credentials, altered timestamps, the IP address traced back, not to her computer, but to another office. Claire's office. Ethan's heart sank. There were even screenshots, Amara's private notes about discovering inconsistencies in the company database. She'd been investigating a leak herself, trying to protect the company, and they'd used that against her. He felt sick. He remembered Claire's calm smile when she handed him the printed email. The way she'd said, "It's not personal." The way she'd offered to handle it. He'd let her manipulate him. He'd humiliated an innocent woman in front of everyone. Now that woman was lying unconscious in a hospital bed because of him. Ethan leaned back in the chair, eyes burning. I fired the only person who ever cared about this company more than I did. His voice broke, low and raw, and I destroyed her life. He stared at the flash drive again, his reflection faint in a laptop screen. Around him, the room was silent except for the steady beeping of the monitor. "I'll fix this," he whispered, "even if it's the last thing I do." He reached out, gently taking Amara's hand in his. Her fingers were cold, limp, but he held on anyway. "You trusted me once," he said softly. "Let me earn that back. I'll make them pay for what they did." Her eyelids fluttered slightly, just for a second. Ethan froze, hope catching in his chest. But she didn't wake. Still, that small movement felt like a sign. When he left the hospital that night, the flash drive was in his coat pocket, burning like truth in his hand. Outside, the city lights blurred through his tears. He climbed into his car and sat there for a long time before starting the engine. He wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was a man carrying guilt, and now a mission. The storm had passed, but inside him, something had only just begun. The next morning, Ethan sat in his office before dawn, staring at the skyline that had once given him pride. The glass tower of Coal Enterprises gleamed as the sun rose, but for the first time, he didn't see success. He saw corruption hiding behind polished walls. He hadn't slept. The flash drive from Amara's bag sat on his desk like a silent witness, its secrets still echoing in his mind. Every folder he opened the night before revealed another betrayal. Not from Amara, but from the very people he trusted most. By the time his staff began trickling in, Ethan was already logged into the company's secure server, tracing logs and files himself. He was the CEO. No one dared question him. Not yet. He started with the time-stamped emails that had supposedly come from Amara's account. At first glance, they looked legitimate, until he noticed something strange. The IP addresses used were linked to an internal proxy, a system only the senior management team could access. Then he found it, a login ID created under her name, but registered by someone from the IT department weeks before the leak. It had been planted. His stomach twisted as he clicked through surveillance archives. Hours of security footage loaded on screen, grainy and dull, until one clip made his blood run cold. It was from a day before Amara was fired. The video showed Claire and two department heads standing near the IT server room, talking in hushed tones. Claire handed a flash drive to one of them and said something Ethan couldn't hear. A few minutes later, the same man entered the server room alone. He paused the footage, zooming in on the timestamp. It was the same hour the fake emails were created. Ethan sat back, a mix of disbelief and rage pulsing through his veins. They did this. They all did this. He felt something heavy settle in his chest, not just guilt anymore, but clarity. He'd been blind, not because the truth wasn't there, but because he hadn't wanted to see it. He thought back to how the others treated Amara, the eye rolls, the cold shoulders, the whispers when she walked by. The jokes disguised as compliments. "She's smart for someone like her. She's lucky Cole keeps her around." He'd ignored it. He'd told himself it wasn't his place to interfere, that she could handle herself. He'd let them destroy her piece by piece because it was easier to pretend it wasn't about race or jealousy or fear. Now he knew better. He opened the employee database, scrolling to Amara's profile, but it was gone. Deleted completely. Not even archived. It was as if she'd never existed in the company's records. He stared at the empty space on the screen and felt the shame burn. "They erased her," he whispered, "like she was nothing." The anger that followed was new, sharp, and righteous. It wasn't the rage of a CEO protecting his empire. It was the fury of a man who'd finally woken up to the cost of his silence. He pushed back from the desk, his pulse pounding. He needed to know just how deep this went. That afternoon, he walked through the office halls, listening, really listening for the first time. Conversations stopped when he passed. Phones were set down. But as he turned the corner near the executive lounge, he heard laughter, careless and cruel. Can you believe she actually thought he'd believe her? Claire's voice. "Yeah." Another man snorted. She played the victim card till the end. "Typical." Someone else added, "Hey, at least she's finally out of here. The boss should thank us. That girl was getting too comfortable." More laughter. Ethan stood there, unseen, every word cutting deeper than the last. Getting rid of her was the best thing that ever happened to this place, Claire said, sipping her coffee. Now we can run things the way we want, without her shadow hanging over us. That was the moment Ethan's heart turned cold. He realized that he wasn't standing among colleagues. He was standing among predators who smiled in his face while poisoning his judgment. They had used his power to destroy someone innocent. He stepped back quietly, his mind spinning. The rage that rose inside him wasn't wild. It was focused, simmering, dangerous. He would expose them, every single one. And when he did, he would make sure Amara's name was not only cleared, it would be remembered. As he walked back to his office, the city lights flickering through the tall windows, he whispered under his breath, "You laughed when she fell, but when I'm done, you'll wish you never touched her." Outside, thunder rumbled again, the kind that didn't just announce a storm, but a reckoning. The hospital room was dim, lit only by the steady hum of machines and the soft glow of a bedside lamp. Amara lay motionless, her face pale against the white sheets, her breathing shallow but steady. Beside her sat an old woman, frail, wrapped in a faded shawl, her hands trembling as she clutched a small Bible. "Lord," the woman whispered, her voice cracked with exhaustion and faith, "you've carried us through hunger, through nights of crying, through doors that slammed in our faces. Don't stop now. Please keep my baby alive." It was Amara's grandmother, the only family she had left. Her lips moved slowly, whispering stories between her prayers, stories meant for Amara's spirit to hear. "Remember when you said you'd buy me a little house one day?" she murmured, stroking Amara's hand. "You said no more sleeping with the rain dripping through the roof. You said you'd make me proud. You already did, child. You already did." Ethan stood at the doorway, frozen. He had come quietly, bringing flowers that suddenly felt meaningless in his hands. The sound of that trembling voice cut through him like nothing ever had. Every word was a mirror, showing him how blind he'd been. He wanted to step forward to say something, anything, but his throat burned with guilt. The old woman turned slightly, sensing a presence. Her eyes met his. "You're him," she said softly, not with anger, just tired knowing. Ethan lowered his head. "Yes, ma'am." She studied him for a moment, then sighed. "I don't have strength to hate anyone. I just want my child to wake up. But if you're here, maybe God sent you for a reason." Her words shattered whatever control he'd been holding. Ethan's chest tightened, and his voice broke. "I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know what they did to her. I was blind." The grandmother nodded slowly. "Blindness can be healed, son, but it takes more than tears. It takes truth." She reached out, placing her frail hand over his. "You bring truth to light. That's how you help her now." Ethan nodded, tears spilling freely. For a moment, the room felt still, two generations connected by pain and grace. But outside that peace, danger was already moving. Across the hospital corridor, Claire walked briskly, her face half hidden under a cap and mask. Her heels clicked softly against the floor, and in her hand, she clutched a duplicate keycard she'd stolen from a nurse. Her eyes were cold, sharp, the look of someone desperate to bury what she'd done. She'd overheard whispers that Ethan had found something, and if that flash drive reached the board, she was finished. As she reached the room, she paused at the glass window. Inside, she saw Ethan sitting beside Amara's bed, his head bowed in regret, the old woman praying quietly. Her jaw tightened. She slipped a hand in her pocket and felt the cold steel of a small USB destroyer, a tiny device that could fry any flash drive in seconds. Her lips curved into a forced smile beneath the mask. "Goodbye, little genius," she muttered under her breath. As Ethan stood to get water for the grandmother, Claire pushed the door handle slowly. The lock clicked. The prayer inside continued softly, unaware that danger had just stepped into the room. Claire's fingers trembled as she stepped inside the hospital room. The steady rhythm of the heart monitor filled the silence, a cruel reminder that Amara was still alive, still a threat. Ethan's flowers sat on the bedside table, a symbol of guilt that made Claire's stomach twist with disgust. She moved fast, Her eyes darted around the room until she spotted Amara's handbag resting on a chair beside the bed. The flash drive. It had to be there. Claire's breathing quickened. She crouched, digging through the bag until her fingers brushed cold metal. "Got you," she whispered, sliding the drive into the small destroyer device. The machine blinked red, then began to hum softly as it powered up. But before she could press the button, the door opened. A nurse stepped in, a tall, middle-aged woman with sharp eyes. "Ma'am, what are you doing?" Claire froze. "Oh, I'm her sister," she stammered, forcing a shaky smile. The nurse frowned. "She doesn't have a sister." "Who are you?" Claire's face hardened. "Mind your business." She turned, clutching the drive. The nurse grabbed her wrist. "I said stop." The destroyer clattered to the floor. The red light blinked faster, seconds away from activating. Claire yanked free and shoved the nurse back against the wall. "You don't understand." The door burst open again. Ethan. His eyes went from the struggling nurse to Claire's hand. The flash drive clenched tight. His face drained of color, then flushed with rage. "Claire, what the hell are you doing?" His voice was low, dangerous. She stammered. "Ethan, please, you don't know what she did." "Enough." His shout echoed off the sterile walls. "You set her up, didn't you?" The nurse pointed at Claire. "She was trying to destroy something from the patient's bag." Ethan's chest heaved. The betrayal hit him again, sharper this time. "You ruined her life, and I let you." Claire backed toward the door, fear flickering in her eyes. "You think you can save her? You'll destroy yourself with her." She turned and bolted down the hall. Ethan ran after her, but stopped halfway, the nurse shouting behind him, "Sir, the patient." He turned back and froze. The heart monitor beside Amara's bed had changed. The steady beep had turned into a frantic rhythm, wild and uneven. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. "Amara," he whispered, rushing to her side. No, stay with me, please." The nurse pressed the emergency button. Alarms blared. Footsteps thundered in from the corridor. Doctors flooded the room, shouting medical codes as they surrounded the bed. Ethan stepped back, his hands shaking, the flash drive still on the floor where it had fallen. He watched helplessly as they worked to stabilize her. The sound of paddles charging, a doctor shouting clear, then the thud of electricity. Amara's body jolted. The monitor flatlined for one horrifying second. Ethan's knees weakened. "Don't do this, Amara. Please don't." Then, a faint beep. Another. The line steadied. He let out a trembling breath, tears streaming down his face. As the doctors adjusted the machines, the nurse handed him the flash drive. "You'd better keep that safe," she said softly. "People don't try this hard unless they're hiding something big." Ethan looked down at the tiny drive in his palm, the truth she almost died for, and realized this wasn't just about Amara anymore. It was about everything rotten he'd built his empire on, and he was going to burn it down. The hallway outside the ICU was a blur of white coats and shouting voices. Ethan stood frozen, his back against the cold wall, his hands trembling as doctors rushed past him into Amara's room. The sound of the heart monitor was muffled behind the glass, a steady rhythm that suddenly broke into chaos. Then came the words that sliced through him. "She's crashing." Ethan pressed a fist to his mouth, choking back the scream rising in his throat. Through the glass window, he saw flashes, hands moving fast, a doctor calling for more oxygen, a nurse counting down as they shocked her chest again. He couldn't breathe. He wanted to run in, to hold her hand, but all he could do was watch. And then, everything went silent. The monitor emitted one long, piercing tone. Flatline. The hallway seemed to spin. His legs nearly gave out. "No," he whispered. "Not her. Please, not her." As the doctors fought to bring her back, Ethan's mind broke open, memories flashing like lightning. He saw her first day at the office. Amara standing in front of him, nervous but smiling, her voice steady as she said, "Thank you for giving me this opportunity, sir. I won't disappoint you." He saw her staying late to fix everyone's mistakes, quietly taking blame for things she never did. The way she would still smile, even when others whispered behind her back. And then, something deeper surfaced. A small girl, maybe 9 years old, sitting alone on a cracked school bench. Her brown eyes were red from crying as two boys laughed and dumped her notebook into a puddle. "Go back where you came from," they shouted. The little girl didn't fight back. She just picked up her soaked notebook and whispered, "You don't know me." That girl was Amara. Her grandmother's voice echoed through time, soft but powerful. "Don't let bitterness live in you, my child. The world will try to make you hate it, but hate is poison. You fight it with kindness, or it wins." Ethan felt his chest tighten. He finally understood. She'd been fighting battles long before she met him. He was just another wound she carried. Back in the present, a nurse ran out of the room, shouting for a crash cart. Ethan caught her arm. "Please, is she?" The nurse's eyes were grim. "We're trying. She's strong, but she's losing blood pressure fast." Ethan's vision blurred. He slid down to the floor, burying his face in his hands. "God, please, she doesn't deserve this." Not her. Time seemed to stretch, the air thick with fear. The faint, constant tone of the monitor filled the silence like a cruel lullaby. Inside the room, they shocked her again. Clear. Her body jolted. Once. Twice. Then a single weak beep. Another. The tone began to return, fragile but alive. Outside, Ethan lifted his head. His eyes filled with tears of relief as he whispered, "She's fighting back." He pressed his hand to the glass, voice trembling. "I swear, Amara, when you wake up, I'll make them pay. Every single one." The monitor continued to beep, faint but steady, proof that hope hadn't died yet. The faint beep, beep, beep broke through the thick silence like sunlight piercing a storm. Doctors froze mid-motion, exchanging glances. "We got a pulse," one shouted. Nurses moved quickly, adjusting tubes and stabilizing the monitor. Outside the glass, Ethan exhaled so hard it felt like he'd been holding his breath for hours. His knees went weak with relief. "She's alive," he whispered. "She's really alive." He pressed a trembling hand against the window, watching as the color slowly returned to Amara's face. For the first time since she collapsed, hope flickered inside him, raw, fragile, but real. When the doctor stepped out, Ethan rushed forward. "Is she?" "She's stable for now," the doctor said. "But she's weak. That girl has a fighter's heart. Not many come back from what she just did." Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "She's always been a fighter," he murmured. "And I'm not letting her fight alone anymore." He stood by her bedside for hours, watching the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest. Her hand rested limply on the blanket, and he gently took it in his own. "I swear, Amara," he whispered, "I'm going to clear your name. I'll destroy anyone who tried to ruin you, even if it means losing everything I have." But across town, the war for his downfall had already begun. Inside the sleek glass walls of Velocity Corp's boardroom, Claire sat at the long mahogany table, her expression carefully composed. Around her sat the senior executives, the same ones who'd laughed about getting rid of her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Claire began smoothly, "we have a crisis. Ethan's been seen spending every night at the hospital of that girl, the one we dismissed last week." She paused, letting the words hang. "He's emotionally compromised. He's not thinking clearly. He's putting his position, and this company, at risk." Mr. Hargrove, the oldest board member, frowned. "Are you saying he's involved with her?" Claire gave a subtle shrug. "Let's just say guilt makes men weak. He's blinded by whatever connection he thinks he has with her. I've seen this before. It's dangerous." Whispers rippled across the table. "And if he's about to expose confidential company data over some emotional meltdown," she continued, "we can't risk it. The board needs to take control before he drags us all down with him." Silence followed. Then one voice, calm, cold, final: "Prepare the documents. We'll remove him quietly." Claire's lips curved into a faint smile as she leaned back in her chair. "Good. I'll handle the transition." Back at the hospital, Ethan stood by Amara's bed, unaware that the same people he once trusted were plotting to strip everything from him. Amara's eyelids fluttered faintly, a soft groan escaping her lips. Ethan froze, heart racing. "Amara," he whispered, gripping her hand tighter. "It's me, Ethan. You're safe." Her eyes opened halfway, confused and glassy, but she looked at him, really looked at him. A single tear slipped down her cheek. "You fired me," she murmured weakly. Ethan's voice broke. I know, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making that right. Her lips parted, but before she could respond, her eyes fluttered shut again, exhaustion claiming her once more. Ethan stood there, lost in the sound of her heartbeat on the monitor, unaware that while one miracle had just saved her life, another betrayal was already coming for his. Ethan sat in the boardroom that once felt like his kingdom. Now, it was a courtroom. The atmosphere was heavy with silence, broken only by the click of pens and the faint hum of the air conditioning. Across the table, the board members avoided his eyes. Claire sat at the head, dressed sharply in gray, her posture flawless, her expression composed. Ethan, she began smoothly, the board has voted unanimously. Effective immediately, you are suspended from your duties as CEO of Velocity Corporation. The words hit like a bullet. Ethan blinked, stunned. Suspended? On what grounds? Emotional instability, Claire said, pretending sympathy. You've been neglecting responsibilities, making unauthorized investigations, and involving yourself with a terminated employee. That terminated employee almost died because of this company, he snapped, slamming his hand on the table. And I have proof. Claire cut in, her tone calm and icy. Proof that doesn't exist anymore. The flash drive went missing this morning. Ethan's heart dropped. What? She leaned forward, smirking slightly. You're not the only one who can play detective, Ethan. A few of the executives exchanged nervous glances, but no one spoke up. Fear kept them silent. Claire continued. The board has decided it's in the company's best interest that I step in as acting CEO during your recovery period. He looked around the table, desperate for one ally, one voice to defend him. But the faces around him were blank. The same people who'd once cheered his leadership now watched him fall without a word. Ethan clenched his jaw, eyes burning. You'll regret this, he said quietly. All of you. Claire's smile was razor thin. We'll take our chances. Security escorted him out, his own employees averting their gaze as he passed. In a single morning, everything he'd built, every late night, every deal, every sacrifice was gone. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the air was thick with the smell of disinfectant and quiet fear. Amara's fingers twitched as she slowly opened her eyes again. The ceiling lights blurred above her, and pain pulsed at the base of her skull. She tried to speak, but only a hoarse whisper escaped. A nurse hurried to her side. Hey, easy now, sweetheart. You've been through a lot. Don't try to talk yet. Amara blinked, confusion and terror mixing in her eyes. Her lips moved soundlessly at first, then managed to form one trembling word. Danger. The nurse frowned. What do you mean? Amara's hand trembled as she reached for the nurse's wrist. Her voice cracked as she forced out. A woman. She wants me gone. The nurse froze, glancing toward the hallway. Who? What woman? But Amara's strength faded. Her eyelids fluttered, her breathing uneven. The nurse hesitated, unsure what to make of it. It's okay, honey. You're safe now. But Amara wasn't safe, not even close. Outside the hospital, a black sedan idled across the street. Inside sat Claire, sunglasses covering her eyes, her phone pressed to her ear. She's awake? She said coldly. Then we move fast. I don't want her talking to anyone, especially him. She ended the call, watching the hospital entrance with chilling calm. Inside, Ethan sat in his car in the parking lot, staring at the building through the windshield. He had nothing left. No job, no allies, no power. But he still had one thing Claire didn't. A conscience and a promise. He whispered to himself, Hold on, Amara. I'm coming back for you. The sun crept weakly through the hospital blinds, tracing pale lines across Amara's face. Her voice was still gone, but her mind was sharp, sharper than ever. Every fragment of memory from that night returned in flashes. The laughter, the argument, the sudden headlights. And Claire's voice. Cold, threatening. She knew now that silence would kill her. So, she forced herself to move. Her hand shook as she pulled a pen from the nurse's clipboard and tore a sheet from the back of a medical form. It took all her strength to sit up. The machines beeped in protest, but she didn't stop. Each word was pain, but it was truth, and truth was all she had left to fight with. She wrote Ethan's name first, then every detail she could remember. The meeting in the break room, the altered financial files, the fake signatures, the night of her accident, and finally, the name of the man who'd been driving the car, Claire's assistant, who vanished right after she was hit. By the time she finished, her fingers were stained with ink and tears. She folded the letter carefully and handed it to the nurse. "Please, make sure Ethan Wells gets this," she whispered hoarsely. "He'll know what to do." The nurse nodded, eyes soft with understanding. "I promise." Hours later, Ethan stood in a dim hotel room, staring at the ceiling. His phone was dead, his career was gone, and the woman he'd failed to protect was barely hanging on. Then a knock. He opened the door to find the nurse standing there, holding the folded letter. "She wanted you to have this," she said. Ethan took it, hands trembling. "Is she okay?" "She's resting," the nurse replied. "But she said it's urgent." When she left, Ethan unfolded the note. His eyes widened as he read each line. Every lie, every forged report, every name. His pulse quickened. "She remembered everything," he whispered. "She had the proof all along." He didn't wait. He drove straight to his old office, stormed past security, and slammed the note on the desk of the company's compliance officer. "You want corruption?" he said. "There's your corruption." The officer skimmed the pages, his eyes darkening with every sentence. "If this is real, Claire's finished." "Oh, it's real," Ethan said. "And I'm not stopping until everyone who hurt her pays." By the time he returned to the hospital, his heart was lighter. For the first time, there was a path forward. Justice felt possible again. But when he pushed open the door to Amara's room, everything froze. The bed was empty, sheets half pulled for lines dangling. The chair where her grandmother always sat was overturned. The monitors were off. "Amara," he called, his voice cracking. "Mrs. Grant." A nurse hurried in, panic flashing across her face. "They're gone. The night shift says 2 women left with a transfer order, but no one authorized it." Ethan's heart pounded. "Who signed it?" The nurse handed him a small, half-burned envelope pulled from the trash. His name was still visible across the front, Ethan Wells. He tore it open. Inside was a corner of scorched paper, barely legible. 3 words remained unburned. "She found us." Ethan's hands shook as the envelope slipped to the floor. Outside, the wind howled through the parking lot, carrying the scent of smoke and something darker. Amara and her grandmother were gone, and somewhere, Claire was already moving her next piece. The city lights blurred past as Ethan sped through the streets, one hand gripping the wheel, the other clutching the burned envelope. The word "she found us" echoed in his mind like a curse. Every hospital, every alley, every passing shadow seemed to mock him with what he'd lost again. He stopped at 3 different hospitals, showing Amara's photo to anyone who would listen. No one had seen her. By the time dawn bled into the skyline, exhaustion and fear had replaced reason. His phone buzzed, an unknown number. He answered immediately. "Amara?" A rough voice replied. "This is Detective Ortiz, NYPD. You're listed as an emergency contact for a woman named Grant, older, mid-60s. Ethan's stomach clenched. "Her grandmother. Where is she?" Ortiz hesitated. "We found her unconscious at a roadside motel off Lincoln Avenue. Paramedics say she's stable, but she was drugged. There's no sign of the girl she was with." Ethan's grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles turned white. "I'm on my way." When he arrived, the motel was already swarming with police lights. Ortiz, a tall, broad man with kind but tired eyes, met him near the ambulance. "She's inside," he said. "Looks like someone wanted to make sure she stayed quiet." Ethan's chest burned with dread as he stepped into the room. The old woman lay on the bed, her skin pale, her breathing shallow. Her hands were bruised, as if she'd tried to fight. "Mrs. Grant," he whispered, kneeling beside her. "It's Ethan. You're safe now." Her eyelids fluttered, barely open. "They took her," she rasped. "They said she asked too many questions." "Who?" Her lips trembled. "A man in a black car. He said, it's just business." Ethan felt his blood run cold. He turned to Ortiz. "Check the cameras. Anything on security?" Ortiz nodded to one of his officers, who shook his head. Footage is wiped, sir. Hard drive's gone. The detective sighed, rubbing his temples. This feels like a professional grab. No ransom, no messages. Someone wanted her disappeared. Ethan stared at the empty bed, rage rising like fire under his skin. He'd been blind once before, but not this time. Not again. Detective, he said, voice steady but low. I know who's behind this. Ortiz raised an eyebrow. You got a name? Claire Dalton, Ethan said. Acting CEO of Velocity Corporation. She's covering up fraud, and Amara was the only one who could expose her. Ortiz scribbled the name down. That's a serious accusation. She already tried to kill her once. Ethan snapped. You think it's coincidence she disappears right when I get proof? Ortiz studied him for a long moment. I'll open an investigation. But if this woman's as powerful as you say, she'll have people watching every move we make. Ethan nodded grimly. Then I'll move where they can't see. Outside, the wind howled through the empty parking lot. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, washing streaks of blood off the motel steps. Ethan looked up at the sky, the city's neon glow reflecting in his eyes. He felt something shift inside him. The last trace of guilt burn away, replaced by fury. He'd lost his company. He'd lost his reputation. But losing Amara? That was his breaking point. He turned back to Ortiz. You said the driver was a man in a black car? Yeah. Late model sedan, no plates. Witness saw him heading toward the industrial district. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then, that's where I'll start. Ortiz frowned. You planning to do something stupid? Ethan's eyes were dark and certain. No, he said. I'm planning to do something right. As he walked away into the rain, he could still hear the nurse's voice in his head, gentle but haunting. She's a fighter. And now so was he. Rain still poured over the city, turning the streets into streaks of silver. Ethan stood beside Detective Ortiz in the dim glow of the police station's war room, surrounded by maps, photos, and a dozen unanswered questions. We traced the black sedan, Ortiz said, pointing at a marked location on the map, the docks by the Hudson River. Abandoned 2 hours ago. No prints, no plates. Whoever grabbed her knew what they were doing. Ethan's phone buzzed with another call, reporters. His leak had gone viral within minutes. He'd sent encrypted documents to 3 trusted journalists, exposing the fake invoices, falsified reports, and the trail of bribes Claire had buried for years. Velocity Corp was now trending worldwide. Ortiz shot him a look. You just declared war. Ethan's jaw tightened. Good. Maybe it's time people saw who she really is. He glanced at the wall clock. Every second felt heavier. We need to move before she moves her. Ortiz nodded. SWAT's on standby, but we need a lead on her location. We're tracking phone pings near the docks. Ethan turned toward the window, the city stretching before him, a glittering battlefield. We don't have time for tracking. She's still out there, somewhere in the city outskirts. Amara's eyes fluttered open to darkness and pain. Her wrists were tied behind her with thick rope, her head pounding from the drug. The floor was cold concrete, the air smelling of oil and metal. A warehouse. The last thing she remembered was a shadow leaning over her, a whisper. Should have stayed quiet, sweetheart. Her heart thudded, panic clawing at her chest, but she forced herself to breathe. Don't break. Don't panic. Then she felt something sharp beside her hand. A broken glass shard from a shattered bottle. Hope flickered. Slowly, she turned her wrist, dragging the rope against the jagged edge. Each pull burned her skin, blood trickling down her fingers, but she didn't stop. You don't get to win, she whispered under her breath. Not again. Somewhere outside, voices argued. Claire said she wants her gone by morning. Then you do it. I'm not touching her again. Her pulse quickened. Claire. The name echoed like thunder in her mind. The rope snapped. She gasped quietly, rubbing her wrists, ignoring the sting. She crouched low, scanning the dimly lit room. A single bulb flickered near the door. She saw a rusty toolbox, and in it a small wrench. That'll do. She moved like a shadow, her bare feet silent on the concrete. One of the guards entered moments later, whistling, phone in hand. As he turned the corner, she struck, swinging the wrench into his leg. He collapsed with a groan. She hit him again, harder this time. Adrenaline drowned her fear. She grabbed his phone and sprinted toward the back door. It was locked, but she could see light bleeding through the gaps. The phone had no signal, but there was a GPS icon flashing red. Last location shared. She whispered a shaky prayer, clutching the phone like a lifeline. Please work. Back at HQ. Ortiz's computer pinged. Got something. Anonymous device just pinged at the old warehouse district. Ethan's heart slammed in his chest. That's her. Ortiz grabbed his jacket. Let's move. They raced through the rain, sirens slicing through the night. Ortiz called for backup, but Ethan didn't wait. He jumped out of the moving car as soon as the warehouse came into view. Gunfire cracked from inside. He froze, then bolted toward the sound. Amara. Inside, she was crawling behind metal barrels, ducking as bullets shattered glass overhead. The driver, the same man who'd taken her, was firing wildly. Ethan charged him, tackling him from behind. They hit the floor hard. Ethan threw the first punch, then another, fury exploding through every strike. Where is she? The man spat blood. She's right behind you. Ethan turned, and there she was. Dirty, bleeding, trembling, but standing. Their eyes met, disbelief and relief flooding in at once. Before he could speak, she whispered, You came. He nodded, breathless. I never stopped looking. Outside, Ortiz's sirens drew closer. Claire's empire was collapsing, the world now watching her crimes unfold on every screen. But inside that broken warehouse, among the shards and chaos, two people who'd been torn apart by lies finally found the one truth that still mattered. They were alive. Rain battered the roof of the old warehouse as flashing red and blue lights painted the walls in chaos. Sirens wailed outside, echoing like justice finally screaming to be heard. Ethan stood in the middle of the room, chest heaving, holding Amara close. Her pulse was faint but steady, her breath shallow against his chest. Then a familiar voice sliced through the sound of boots and shouting officers, cold, sharp, and trembling. Put her down, Ethan. Claire. She stood near the back exit, her designer coat soaked, mascara streaking down her face. In her shaking hand, Ethan's personal tablet, the same one that contained the company's financial data, the hidden records she'd built her empire of lies on. Ethan turned slowly, still holding Amara protectively. It's over, Claire. Claire laughed, a desperate, broken sound. Over? You think this ends because you call the cops? You don't know how the world works. They'll believe me before they ever believe her. Her words hit like a slap. Ethan's eyes darkened. You mean before they believe a black woman you tried to destroy? She froze for a moment, realizing how much he knew. You don't understand, she hissed. She was going to ruin everything. She knew too much. She didn't belong in that seat beside you. She was a threat. Ethan took a step closer, pulling his phone from his pocket and discreetly pressing record. Say that again. Claire scoffed. You think I'm afraid of you? You're already finished, Ethan. The board is on my side. But her voice trembled now, panic seeping through arrogance. Ethan's tone sharpened. They're not anymore. I sent them everything. The falsified contracts, the offshore transfers, the audio clips you didn't wipe from your office files. He nodded toward Ortiz, who had just entered with 2 officers. And now they'll have this too. Claire's eyes darted to the exits, cornered animal instinct. She lunged toward the door, but Ortiz moved faster, grabbing her arm. She fought, screaming, You can't do this. She doesn't deserve any of this. I made this company what it is. Ortiz pulled the tablet from her grip and handed it to Ethan. She's done. As the officers cuffed her, Ethan finally let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. The storm outside roared, thunder rolling like applause for a truth long buried. He turned back to Amara, who lay barely conscious on the cold floor. Her lips trembled, eyes fluttering open. Ethan. He knelt beside her, rain dripping from his hair, emotion choking his voice. You're safe now. Her gaze was distant, pain clouding her features. They hate me. Ethan shook his head. No, they feared you. Because you were brilliant. He reached for her hand, gripping it tight. I see you, Amara. I should have seen you all along. Her tears mingled with the rain on her cheeks. You fired me. I did, he whispered, voice cracking. And I'll live with that for the rest of my life. But I swear, I'll make it right. Amara tried to smile, but her strength faded. Her head rested against his shoulder, and she whispered weakly, "Then start by telling the world the truth." Ethan nodded, pressing his forehead against hers. I already did. Outside, news vans gathered. Reporters shouted questions as officers led Claire away in handcuffs. Cameras flashed. Microphones reached forward. Is it true, Mr. Kane? Was your assistant framed? Did racism play a role in her firing? Ethan stepped out into the storm, Amara still in his arms, and faced the sea of flashing lights. His voice cut through the noise, steady, remorseful, resolute. Yes, he said, it's all true. She was innocent, and I was blind. The crowd went silent. The rain seemed to pause. In that moment, the powerful billionaire and the woman he had once dismissed became symbols of something greater. Truth, redemption, and the fight for justice in a world too quick to judge. Amara's grandmother appeared at the edge of the crowd, her frail hands clasped in prayer. She whispered softly, "Thank you, Lord. Let the truth be seen." As the paramedics lifted Amara onto a stretcher, Ethan followed close behind. Cameras caught the moment he reached for her hand again. And in that still frame, the drenched CO, the broken assistant, the fallen villain being dragged away, America saw more than a scandal. They saw humanity. They saw what happens when truth finally knocks on the door. The morning sun crept gently through the hospital blinds, warming Amara's face. The rhythmic hum of machines had become her daily soundtrack, a reminder that she was still here, still breathing. Her body ached, but it wasn't just from the crash or the bruises. It was the kind of ache that came from betrayal, humiliation, and loss all at once. She opened her eyes to find her grandmother sitting by the window, humming softly to a gospel tune from the radio. The old woman's hands were folded around a worn Bible, her silver hair tucked neatly beneath a faded scarf. "Morning, Grandma," Amara whispered, her voice still raspy. Her grandmother turned, her smile gentle but tired. "Morning, baby. You gave me a scare." Amara tried to smile back, but her lips quivered. I thought I wasn't going to make it." The older woman reached for her hand, her touch warm and steady. "You did, 'cause the good Lord ain't done with you yet." Tears filled Amara's eyes. "They tried to destroy me, Grandma. They took everything, my job, my name, my dignity." Her grandmother nodded slowly. "I know, child, but what they can't take is your spirit. Forgive but never forget. That's how you heal." Amara stared at her hands, bruised but strong. The word forgive felt heavy. How could she forgive people who smiled while watching her life crumble? Still, deep inside, she knew her grandmother was right. Outside, the world was changing. The scandal at Velocity Corp had ignited storm. For weeks, the media ran headlines exposing corporate racism and toxic work culture. Commentators debated the story on national TV. Hashtags like #JusticeForAmara trended across social media. And at the center of it all, Ethan Kane. He stood before the board of directors, a man transformed. Cameras flashed as he took the microphone during a public hearing. His voice trembled, not from fear, but from conviction. "I failed her," he began, looking straight into the crowd of employees and press. "Not because I didn't know the truth, but because I didn't want to see it. I was blind to the prejudice that poisoned my own company, blind to the pain my silence caused." He paused, swallowing hard. Amara James was one of the most brilliant, hardworking employees I've ever met. And I let her be destroyed because it was easier to believe lies than to face the truth about who we really were. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Cameras clicked rapidly. He continued, "Effective immediately, I am stepping down as CEO. Not because I was forced to, but because I have no right to lead a company that I once allowed to be built on injustice." Gasps filled the room. Even Claire's former allies looked shaken. Ethan turned to the board. "From now on, Velocity Corp will fund diversity and ethics training across all departments. I'll donate my severance to scholarships for underrepresented students in Amara's name. Applause began softly, then swelled into a standing ovation. Back in the hospital, Amara watched the broadcast on a small television mounted to the wall. Her chest tightened as she listened to him speak. His words weren't perfect, but they were honest. Her grandmother smiled knowingly. He's trying to make it right, baby. Sometimes people have to lose everything to find their heart. Amara exhaled slowly, the tears falling before she could stop them. He's doing what I never thought he would. You gonna forgive him? Her grandmother asked gently. Amara stared at the screen. Ethan's face looked older, worn down by guilt and truth. Maybe not today, she said softly. But someday. Her grandmother nodded. That's enough for now. A nurse entered, smiling. Miss James, you've got mail. She handed over a small, white envelope. Inside was a note, handwritten. Amara, I know I can't undo what I did. But if you ever allow me, I'd like to see you, not as your boss, but as a man trying to learn how to be better. Ethan. Amara folded the note, pressing it to her heart. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in months, she felt peace. Outside her window, the world moved on, cars, laughter, life. But inside that room, healing had finally begun. And somewhere, deep within her, hope was starting to bloom again. Spring sunlight poured through the wide glass windows of the small downtown office. The place wasn't much. 2 desks, a secondhand printer, and a wall covered in sticky notes and dreams. But for Amara, it was everything. Her nonprofit, Rise Her Foundation, had finally opened its doors. It was a safe space for young women, especially women of color, who had been silenced, overlooked, or underestimated in corporate America. She looked around proudly as a group of volunteers packed boxes of mentorship materials and laptops. On the wall, a framed quote read, "They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds." And there, standing quietly in the corner with a clipboard and calculator, was Ethan. He'd shown up a month after she launched. No grand speech, no press coverage. He was knocked on her door one morning and said, "I heard you could use someone who's good with numbers." At first, Amara hesitated. Part of her wanted to tell him to leave, to remind him of everything she'd endured because of him. But there was something different in his eyes, humility, not pity. So she let him stay. Now, months later, he was still here, organizing budgets, helping with donations, and running errands like any other volunteer. He never mentioned Velocity Corp or his past title. Just Ethan. Sometimes, when she caught him looking at her across the office, there was something unspoken between them, a fragile warmth built on shared pain and slow forgiveness. That afternoon, as she walked out with a box of files, Ethan followed her to the curb. "You've built something incredible, Amara," he said, his tone soft. "You turned everything they did to you into light." She smiled faintly. That was the plan. Pain's only wasted if it doesn't change something. He nodded. "You changed me too." There was a pause, gentle but heavy. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Amara turned, breaking the tension. "You can start by helping me with the donors' dinner this weekend. I need someone who can charm the suits." He grinned slightly. "I'll bring my best tie." For the first time, she laughed, genuinely, freely. A few weeks later, their friendship had become something deeper. Ethan would stay late at the office, helping her craft presentations, sharing coffee breaks that turned into long talks about life, dreams, and redemption. Sometimes, she'd forget who he once was. Other times, she remembered, and that made the trust between them even more precious. But just as peace began to feel normal again, a storm returned. One evening, while Amara was reviewing grant applications, her lawyer called. "Amara, you need to sit down." Her stomach tightened. "What's wrong?" "It's Claire's former partners. They're filing a lawsuit, defamation, financial damages, the works. They're claiming your foundation is funded with stolen company money." Amara froze. "What? That's impossible." "They're saying Ethan funneled corporate assets before resigning. They want both your names in court." Her breath caught. "They're trying to finish what Claire started." Ethan walked in just as she ended the call, his expression shifting as he saw her pale face. "What happened?" She handed him the phone. "They're coming for us. Claire's people." He read the lawyer's message, his jaw tightening. They won't win this time. Amara looked at him, fear and exhaustion in her eyes. I can't go through this again, Ethan. Not another fight. He stepped closer, his voice steady. You won't be alone this time. Her gaze softened, but the shadows of the past still lingered between them. Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon, like the echo of unfinished battles. Amara turned to the window, whispering almost to herself, I thought we'd finally made it out. Ethan's hand brushed hers, firm and reassuring. We will. But the truth always has to fight its last war before it wins. And as the rain began to fall once more, the two stood side by side, ready to face a new storm, not as enemies or victims, but as something stronger. Partners. The courthouse buzzed with tension, the kind that pressed against every heartbeat. Reporters crowded the steps, cameras flashing as Amara and Ethan walked in side by side. She wore a simple navy suit, her curls pulled back, her face calm but fierce. Ethan's expression was unreadable, a mix of resolve and guilt still lingering under the surface. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Former colleagues from Velocity Corp sat in the back rows, whispering. The same board members who once ignored her now avoided her gaze. Claire's old allies, sleek, confident, and ruthless, sat at the defense table, smirking like they already knew the verdict. The judge entered. Court is now in session. The attorney for Claire's partners rose, his voice smooth and venomous. Your Honor, the evidence will show that the defendant, Ms. Amara James, used confidential company funds to start her so-called foundation. She has manipulated the media, destroyed reputations, and fabricated lies to gain sympathy. Amara kept her eyes steady. They can't take your piece again, she told herself. Ethan clenched his jaw, whispering, they're bluffing. The attorney turned, pointing dramatically. And this man, Mr. Ethan Kane, willingly aided her. Together, they conspired to ruin a respected corporate legacy. Murmurs filled the room. Cameras clicked. Amara sat still, her heart pounding, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. Forgive, but never forget. Then the defense rested their case, until the prosecution called their final witness. The court calls Nurse Carla Jefferson. A ripple of confusion spread across the room. Ethan's eyes widened. The nurse who had caught Claire at the hospital months ago. She took the stand, hands trembling slightly as she raised them for oath. I swear to tell the truth. The attorney stepped forward. Ms. Jefferson, can you tell the court your connection to the defendants? I was a night nurse at St. Mary's, she began. I was working the night. Ms. James was admitted after the hit and run. I saw a woman, later identified as Claire Miller, try to tamper with a flash drive in Ms. James's hospital room. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Claire's allies shifted uncomfortably. She claimed to be from corporate legal, Nurse Jefferson continued. But she didn't have clearance. I stopped her, and she ran. That flash drive contained proof Ms. James was framed. The attorney smiled thinly. Do you have evidence of this? The nurse nodded and produced a sealed envelope. The hospital's security footage. It shows her in the room at 2:43 a.m. The courtroom erupted. The judge slammed his gavel. Order! Order! Amara's breath hitched. Months of torment unraveling in one moment of truth. Claire's allies panicked, whispering frantically to their lawyers. The jury leaned forward, their faces shifting from doubt to outrage. Then came Amara's turn. She stood slowly, her heels clicking softly against the courtroom floor as she took the witness stand. Her palms were sweaty, but her eyes burned with quiet fire. The attorney approached. Ms. James, why did you start your foundation? Amara took a breath. Because I know what it feels like to be silenced. To walk into rooms where you have to work twice as hard just to be seen, only to have everything taken from you because of what you look like. She paused, glancing at the jury. But I also know that bitterness is a poison that kills you from the inside. So, I chose something different. I chose to forgive. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge seemed moved. Tears filled Amara's eyes as she continued. This isn't about revenge. It's about resilience. About the people who never get to speak up. And if my pain has to mean something, then let it mean change. A hush settled. And then a single person in the back clapped. Another joined, then another. Within seconds, the entire courtroom was on its feet, applauding her courage. The judge didn't stop them. Ethan's eyes glistened as he watched her, proud, awed, and utterly undone. Hours later, the jury returned their verdict. In favor of the defendants. All charges dismissed. The courtroom exploded with relief. Amara gasped, tears spilling as Ethan pulled her into a hug. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment the world had been waiting for. Justice, not just for one woman, but for everyone who had ever been overlooked. Outside, reporters swarmed them with microphones. "Ms. James, how does it feel to win?" She smiled through her tears. "It's not just my win. It's for everyone who's ever been told they're not enough." Ethan stood beside her, his hand brushing hers as he whispered, "You did it." She turned to him, smiling softly. "We did." And as they stepped into the sunlight for the first time, the world didn't see a fallen CEO and a disgraced assistant. They saw two people who refused to let hate have the final word. The ballroom glowed with soft golden lights, shimmering off the crystal chandeliers. A banner stretched across the stage, the Amara James Foundation, empowering tomorrow's women. The room was alive with laughter, music, and hope, the kind of hope Amara once thought she'd never feel again. Guests from all over the city filled the hall. Women who had once been silenced now stood tall in sleek dresses, networking, smiling, reclaiming their voices. The foundation's first major event had drawn attention from CEOs, journalists, activists, and even politicians. But Amara barely noticed them. Her heart was too full, her nerves too alive. She stepped up to the podium, her silver gown glinting under the lights. Ethan watched from a few feet away, hands in his pockets, eyes steady on her. Every word she spoke carried both strength and humility. "When I started this foundation," Amara said, her voice calm and clear, "I didn't do it for fame or forgiveness. I did it because I wanted young women to know that no matter how badly the world breaks you, you can rise again, piece by piece, until your cracks shine like glass." The crowd applauded. She smiled, blinking back tears. In the corner, her grandmother sat in a wheelchair, clapping proudly. Ethan felt his chest tighten. For months, he had watched Amara rebuild her life, not through vengeance, but through grace. She turned her pain into purpose, and somehow, she taught him to do the same. As the applause faded, he took a deep breath and walked toward the stage. His steps felt heavy, not with fear, but with the weight of everything that had led them here. "Amara," he said softly, stepping up beside her. She blinked, surprised, as he turned to the crowd. "If I could have a moment," Ethan said, his voice carrying across the room. The murmuring guests quieted, their curiosity piqued. He looked at Amara, and for the first time in a long while, his voice trembled. "You once told me that the hardest part of falling isn't the pain, it's learning to trust that you can stand again. You taught me how to stand. You taught me what real strength looks like." Amara's lips parted, breath catching in her chest. Ethan dropped to one knee. The crowd gasped. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a simple, elegant ring, nothing flashy, just a single diamond resting in gold. "Amara James," he said softly, "I've spent years building empires that meant nothing. But tonight, I just want to build something real with you. Will you marry me?" Tears welled up in Amara's eyes. The entire room faded away. All she could see was him, the man who had once been her boss, then her defender, then her heart's quiet anchor through storms she never asked for. For a moment, the memories surged, the hospital bed, the betrayal, the fear. She saw flashes of Claire's smirk, of flashing lights and sirens, of Ethan's bloodied hands as he carried her out of that warehouse. She took a shaky breath. "Ethan, we've both been through so much." He nodded. "I know, and I don't want to erase the past. I just want to write the next chapter with you." Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind again. "Forgive, but never forget." Amara looked down, tears falling freely now. "We can't change the past, Ethan." He swallowed hard, waiting. "But maybe," she whispered, smiling through the tears, "we can build better futures." The crowd erupted in cheers. Cameras flashed. Her grandmother cried softly in the corner, whispering a prayer of gratitude. Ethan stood, slipping the ring onto her trembling finger. He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "You have no idea how long I've waited to breathe like this again." Amara smiled faintly. "Then let's keep breathing together." Music swelled through the ballroom. They kissed, softly at first, then deeply, while the crowd clapped and the lights shimmered like stars. For the first time in years, there was no scandal, no courtroom, no corporate war, just two souls who had been broken and found the courage to start again. Later that night, as they stood by the balcony overlooking the city, Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind. Below them, the streets glowed with life. "What are you thinking?" he whispered. Amara smiled, leaning against him. "That maybe the real miracle wasn't surviving everything we went through." She turned her head slightly, meeting his gaze. "It was finding love in the ruins." Ethan kissed her forehead, whispering, "Then let's never stop rebuilding." And for the first time, it didn't feel like the end of a battle. It felt like the beginning of forever. The sun poured through the wide windows of the Amara James Foundation for Women in Leadership, warming the soft beige walls and polished wood floors. It was morning, the kind of golden, peaceful morning Amara used to dream about from a hospital bed years ago. Now, she was living it. Stacks of applications sat neatly on her desk. Laughter echoed faintly down the hallway where young women worked, their voices filled with the same hope Amara once fought to protect. She sipped her tea, watching them through the glass wall. Women of every color, background, and story, each rebuilding themselves, just like she did. The nonprofit had grown beyond anything she'd imagined. There were mentorship programs, college scholarships, and self-defense classes. Survivors found jobs, mothers found confidence, and daughters found role models. Every success story was a seed planted in soil watered by Amara's pain. That morning, a knock came on her office door. A shy teenage girl peeked in. "Ms. James? You said I could talk to you." Amara smiled. "Of course, come in." The girl walked in nervously, clutching a notebook. Her name was Kayla, 16, from a small town in Mississippi. She had been bullied in school, called names, laughed at for her dark skin, told she'd never make it. "I don't think I belong anywhere," Kayla whispered, eyes downcast. "Everyone just looks at me and sees something I'm not." Amara's heart softened. The pain in that voice was the same pain that had once lived in hers. She got up, walked around the desk, and sat beside her. "You know," she said gently, "there was a time when I thought the same thing. But then I realized something." Kayla glanced up, curious. Amara smiled faintly. "The people who try to break you aren't really afraid of you. They're afraid of your power. Because deep down, they know your light can outshine every lie they tell." Kayla's eyes filled with tears. She nodded slowly, whispering, "Thank you." Amara hugged her, feeling her heart swell with both pride and sorrow. Pride for how far she had come, and sorrow for every girl still fighting that same war. When Kayla left, Amara returned to her desk. A thick white envelope sat in the center, stamped U.S. Department of Corrections. Her hand stilled. She hesitated, then carefully opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter, neat, deliberate handwriting. The first line made her breath hitch. "Dear Amara, they say prison is a place where people rot. But maybe it's also where some of us finally see ourselves clearly. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know, I'm sorry. I was jealous. You were everything I wanted to be. Strong, loved, fearless. I destroyed you because I couldn't face my own reflection. You didn't deserve any of it. Claire." Amara sat silently, the paper trembling in her hand. The same woman who had nearly ruined her life, who had taken her career, her peace, and almost her breath, was now sitting behind bars, writing apologies. She let out a long, slow exhale. The pain didn't vanish, but something inside her loosened, a knot she hadn't realized was still there. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Forgiveness doesn't erase the scars." She looked out the window at the bright sky. "It just stops them from owning you." She folded the letter neatly, placed it in a drawer, and smiled, not with triumph, but with peace. Across the room, a photo hung on the wall, her grandmother in a floral dress, smiling proudly at a younger Amara. Sunlight landed perfectly on the frame, making it glow. Amara stood, walking over. Her fingers brushed lightly against the glass. "We made it, Grandma," she whispered, her voice breaking into a soft laugh. "We really made it." Behind her, laughter filled the hallway again. The foundation's phone rang. Somewhere outside, a group of girls was setting up for an event titled Rise Again. Amara turned back toward the sound, toward life, toward light, toward everything she once thought she'd lost. And as she walked out of her office, the photo caught the sun one last time. A perfect reflection of strength, grace, and the unbreakable spirit of a woman who refused to stay silent. Before you go, if Amara's story moved you, don't stop here. Click the video that's about to appear on your screen. It's another emotional, true-to-life story about redemption, pain, and second chances. Tap it now, and keep your heart on this journey of forgiveness and strength. And don't forget, subscribe, like, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from so we can welcome you to our storytelling family.